Hello YouTube, good afternoon. Today's video we're going to talk about migration. And so the reason why I'm recording this video is last year I recorded a video on journeys as well as using the automation config converter which actually I own. And I actually got quite a lot of likes as well as quite a lot of interest in that video. However, it was recorded last year, and what I want to do is I want to record another one and kind of talk a little bit about the migration process. So, as you are probably aware, there are a lot of users that are looking at the use cases for and maybe preferred options or what is the best way to move, for example, or migrate an entire configuration or potentially maybe just an application. So that's really your choice. You really have to decide how do you want to move. And so why would you want to move? Well, potentially maybe you have for example, an I series, and maybe you're deploying R series, or you're deploying, for example, Velos, and you want to provision a big IP VE on those platforms. So for that is one instance. Or for example, maybe you have something in public cloud and you want to move something to a vCenter instance, and so you deploy your big IP. Right? And now what you want to do is you want to bring a configuration onto it without having to create that from scratch. The reason why you don't want to create something from scratch is that because then you have to make sure all the profiles are configured, all of those policies, for example, all of the virtuals. The little things like bringing in the certs, that's not maybe too bad because maybe you're renewing the certs or you're changing something. So that's not ultimately that bad, but I think configuring all of the inconsistencies might be quite a bit of work, and especially if you have some legacy configurations you're not quite sure what's kind of there. So maybe that's the first stage, just kind of look at, see, okay, what kind of app do I want to bring in, and then make the move. Well, we have this tool called journeys, and you're gonna be seeing a lot of journeys, and it's really a journey as the name describes. The name might change, but I'm not sure. But Journeys has been out for a little while, and as you can see, there's like 20 releases. But what Journeys does have is that Journeys does have a component called ACC, which is actually built into Journeys, and that is the config converter, specifically from TMSH or imperative to declarative. That's only if you're going to go ahead and do app deployment. Then you're going to use that config converter piece of ACC. Now you can use that piece on its own, but to be honest with you, I think the migration process, the tool is to kind of use journeys, and you're going to see this specifically in new stuff that's to come this year with regards to F5. So I'm not going to get into that too much in this discussion. I'm going to really talk about this tool. So we have Journeys. Journeys is published on GitHub. Now it is published on F5 Dev Central. And the reason for that is because it's more your professional services, your migration services, or if you want to do something yourself, it is ultimately community type supported. However, that doesn't prevent you from communicating with the community using GitHub and all those kinds of cool tools. So what I want to do is I want to kind of go through this tool. So Journeys is an application designed to assist people like yourself to migrate a big IP configuration to a new F5 device. And there's a couple of different ways, like I talked before. There's a full config migration, so migration of a big IP configuration from any version, like starting at like most likely 11 or 12 or higher, to something like Velos and R series. The second one is the migration of a mission critical application using AS3 Common API, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the piece here because as the PM for AS3, it's kind of like what I own. It's kind of like what I want to kind of emphasize in this discussion. So it's that whole concept of getting that configuration from a non-declarative to a declarative to be able to use that. Now the big thing about AS3 is that it's your common API to create apps. So for application service migration, it's a great way of being able to move an application from any device, and it's going to be the same common API moving forward for any next-gen platform that that F5 is doing, and that happens to be coming, soon. Put it that way. So it talks a little bit about the full migration. You can load in UCS file or potentially UCS plus AS3, etc. But what I want to do is I want to take a look at this big IP. So I already have a big IP here. Now there's nothing on this big IP other than just maybe one tenant, blue-green tenant, just one. But what I can actually do here is I can actually connect to this big IP. Now I'm using another tool. I'm actually using a combination of two tools here. And the second tool that I'm using is, of course, VS Code, right? VS Code, everyone knows what VS Code. If you don't, highly recommend downloading VS Code and then getting this extension. So the extension that I'm using here is the F5 extension. You can see it's just been updated. So you can just search in the marketplace, you can download the extension, and then you can use this extension to connect to your device. So the first thing that you can do is you can connect to the device, and you can actually go and install your components to be able to use AS3. And you can actually see right here that I've actually installed the latest version of AS3. But if you wanted to install, all you need to do is just click this button and it will actually install it. So I'm connected to this device, I'm browsing, I want to use AS3, it tells you what version you want, and I can just say, okay, this is the latest and it's installed. I can click, if I want to do another version, I can just click to install. So this tool will do everything for you. You don't have to actually worry about installing the RPM, which actually lives here, the RPMs. You won't have to worry about it. As you can see, here's the RPM. This tool will do everything for you. And what it will also do is it will do DO as well. But the most important thing is it will actually take a look. You can see here's tasks. So it's actually looking at the tasks. I'm actually seeing what's actually on the device that was created by AS3. At this point, it's nothing. So this is nice because when I actually create something, I can actually do a get request. So this is just doing a post and get, but in this case, I'm just getting the information. You can actually see here that there's actually a get to the tasks or get to actually get the declarations. In this case, there's no declarations on here based on the tenants. So I'm doing a declare get me all the config. There's nothing here. So I'm going to use journeys to create that. And so what I've actually done is I installed journeys. My journeys app is right here. You can see, I'll make this a little bit bigger, and you can actually see here's the two options. This is the full migration, and here's the app migration. So app migration takes a big IP configuration, and it basically opens it up, and then it allows you to pick and choose the apps that you want. So the first thing that you would need to do is you would need to actually install this application. And so it's not too difficult to do this installation. There are different recommendations. I went with the default recommendation, to be honest with you, and actually worked quite well. So I installed this on Ubuntu desktop. I did try a couple other things, but followed recommendations because it was super simple. You just follow the following here, copy these files, copy this. This is actually on the device itself. So you can actually see, I think that there's this F5 journeys directory. I believe I'm actually in there. So you could actually see here, you can actually see there is the Docker Compose YAML. That's kind of important. There's like the README and there's that sample env that they're talking about. So this is kind of what's like really important because you can actually get this YAML file, and this is kind of how you compose everything. And so you can actually see that here, kind of go download these. One thing that is important, you will need Docker and Docker Compose, right? So that's ultimately kind of like really important. So if I just look at what Docker I'm running here, just follow the documentation on how to get Docker installed and Docker Compose. To be honest, this link actually tells you how to do it right here, and in the Docker Compose. Pretty easy. If you want to use Podman, you can. If you don't want to use Docker, it's just a choice choice of yours. So, and you can see there, this is how you do the Docker pull. So this is pulling all the images. This will pull the image down from the images, and then you can actually see your images here within Docker. You can actually do for example, Docker images. You can actually see what's here. So for example, there's kind of like the images that I have, for etc. So you'll see there is the version of these are just ultimately Docker instances, containers that are running within Docker here, for example. So that's the Docker piece. And then what you do is right at the end, you just do a Docker compose with the -d, right? So Docker compose up. So if you make any changes to the files, for example, if you do an update, you make any changes to the file, then you just do Docker compose, and you can actually see the Docker compose.yaml right here, which if you want, you could actually cat it. Let me do a sudo and cat that file. So sudo docker, let's do a cat on that, and we'll do a Docker compose. So you can actually see here, I've changed the ACC version to the latest ACC version. I've done that. That's my own. And then what I've done is I've exposed the ports. So this is the IP address that I'm running, and I've actually exposed it here. So it's listening on its own. So if you install this on your desktop, that's how you connect to it. And this is how I connect to it, because it's installed on a VM in vCenter. And so you can see here, I'm connecting to it basically right there on that port. That's kind of how I am managing this app Journeys, right? So this Journeys is connected. So follow best practices with regards to security. Make sure this is locked down, not exposed, because if you are interacting with the system, please be aware that you have the opportunities to pull certificates, right? And so if the system is just installed in a generic environment, you have to ask yourself, with regards to those certs, you don't necessarily want them leaving the system. So you might just want to leave the certificate piece up to certificate management and come put it back later. That's your choice. But be aware that this tool will pull the certificates, secure them. But just be careful kind of where you install and how you use the migration, because it's a full migration tool, right? So common sense is really important. So now that we've seen how to install Journeys, at this point we're able to actually connect to it, and you can kind of see Journeys in full action here. So we've got two. So let's go ahead, and we've got a blank big IP. I've put a new big IP there. I've pulled my old UCS file, and now I'm ready to at least configure and push an application. So I'm going to do a new app migration here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to load the UCS file. I'm going to group a bunch of virtuals into some applications and tenants. So this is really cool, because it's going to allow you to say, okay, group these virtuals. And even if you just group one, you can group multiple later on. So if you just want to kind of like get a feel of, okay, let me just create maybe one for now, and then I'll kind of move some later, because your configuration file might have just been used common for everything. But now that you're moving to more of a resource type, so you're starting to treat the big IP as a resource. And so you might be creating projects and namespaces, which are folders basically. And so that's the construct of AS3, where everything is under a folder or a namespace or a project or a tenant. And so that's how you can create a tenant, group those apps that need to be in that tenant, and then go ahead and convert that from Classic over to AS3 using the config converter. And then there's the deployment of it, where this tool's actually going to post it, and then it's got some post-migration diagnostics. And so a couple of interesting things about Journeys. There's also some known issues. So names of certificates and keys should start from letters. Yeah, sure. Objects. So everything is going to kind of be put into a shared tenant. And to be honest with you, you might have to rework some of the naming, right? Just because of the conversion that gets converted. in the tools that you will have to do, there's going to be some namings. Now, when this kind of gets integrated into a central manager, that's a little bit of a different discussion. That's probably an update for maybe 5 months from now, or a couple months. But let's go ahead and acknowledge this, and we'll just give this a simple name of the session. And why not just call this Journey's demo? And this is for YouTube update on how to use Journey's application migration. That's a long term, but I can once I have this session, I can reuse it. So now what I've done is I've actually created that. So this is actually really cool. This is now where it's asking me to install my UCS file, and what do I want to do with my keys. So master keys are used to decrypt some of the fields, so that's kind of really important. So some of the fields are used for decryption. So if you're using Edge and Encrypt, then you've got the keys. Now, you might not want to migrate these keys. You might want to use certificate management tool to migrate the keys, or you might want to come back and migrate the keys yourself. To be honest, that's not that hard to do. You can push them to the device separately. It just really depends upon what you want to do. So what I'm going to do is here, I'm going to import my UCS file. I've got a Journey's demo UCS file right here. And so now you can see the size. So it's actually pretty small of this file, and I can go next. It's going to run through some validation. This might take a few minutes. Actually, in this case, it was quite quick. And so, interesting that there is some uncompliant applications. So these are uncompliant applications with regards to AS3. So they're not compatible with AS3. So only tenants with the green are actually compatible. So there were stuff in there that are just physically not compatible. So what would be something that's not compatible? Potentially maybe something that's like non-HTTP, not really something that is created like L4 through 7. It might be kind of something else. So that you're going to have to judge yourself. You're going to have to go look at your configuration to be able to understand. Now, since this is your configuration, you probably have a better idea of your apps. But what's interesting here is that it has seen that there's actually a couple of tenants here. So I can actually go and look at these tenants and then decide, okay, what do I want to migrate? So if I go and actually look at tenant 1, it's actually going to say that, okay, there's one application there, and this is an HTTP pass-through virtual server. So I can actually see it here. You can actually see that this is a pass-through big AP comp. So there's a node here. There's a virtual that's called pass-through. So in this case here, it has a profile. It has some kind of default SNI is disabled, for example. And then here are my pool members. So here's my virtual, and this virtual references this pool member. And I can scroll down here to see the rest of the configuration. So this is actually a very, very simple configuration. And you can actually, look at this, you can actually preview this in AS3. So what's actually happened is AS3 has actually done a conversion. So this is using that other module. You can see this is going to create a tenant of tenant 1 on Big IP with this application name. Now this should actually, or could actually be edited with an editor. That's where VS Code comes in, or potentially the process of migration through journeys. You can see here is the virtual server. We're using this pool of HTTP, the profile, and in this case, it is a virtual server of port 443. But at this point, it's just pass-through, right? So it's a pass-through process. There's no certs and keys here. So it's pretty simple. Almost think of it as like layer 4, right? Layer 4 for HTTP. So we can go back and click here. So we can save and we can run verification. So this is one app that I want on this tool, and so verification is done. So this is good. So this configuration file is as you can see tenant 1, application 1. So that will be, so for example, this is actually the endpoint. This would be where you declare it to. It'll be declared to tenant 1. This would be the first application that would be added there. So I can save. I think I've already done this. So I can edit this and say, okay, that's great. So, but the biggest thing would be to click this, and this here, I can actually go and close, or I can verify and edit, which is actually kind of kind of cool here if I go to where we were actually back here, but if I wanted to maybe do a little bit of editing, I could actually edit this. And so that's what's really powerful here, is the capability to be able to edit this. And so what potentially would you maybe want to edit? Maybe you would want to edit the IPs, for example. Maybe you would want to edit the names. So that is totally up to you. I actually prefer not to use tenant one. So maybe what I might do is I might just call this journeys, for example, dash demo. And maybe this is, instead of application one, maybe I just call this demo app, for example, one. So I've made a couple of, so this is going to be the tenant name. It's going to be the app name. So I've made a few additions. I'm not going to make too much. Let me go look at what virtual address it's creating here, just so there's no overlap in my lab. And it's pretty harmless. I don't have to modify that. So that is great. I really like that. And so I'm hoping that I can save. Hoping I can save that. And so perfect. So hopefully that will be saved. And go ahead and, example, if I wanted to add something else, I could look at maybe this first one here. So maybe I want that one and that one. These are the two that I want. These, I'm confirming these, add these two new virtuals. So these are kind of what I like. So I really looked at this one already. We kind of, yep, we looked at this one already. Still tenant one. Okay, I should go back and change that. So these three I like. So I'm going to clear selection, view and edit. So here's my two that I want. I wanted to. So this right here. Sure, let's edit this in here. Tenant one. I wanted to put this in the same tenant. So hopefully this is gonna go there. So journeys. Dash demo. So let's see. So this is the app one. So journeys demo, and I'm hoping that let's click back on that. So that's that. Click back on that. And so revert. So I want to try and save this so that they're both the same. Hopefully I save it here, but maybe it's because it's post-processing. You're gonna have to play with this a little bit. There we go. Let's see. Hopefully it will save it. And then so save and run verification. So okay, so that one's done. Save and run verification. Okay, so verification's finished. Okay, that's good. So did the AS3 preview. Okay, so those two are fine. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm happy with these. I've run the verification of that, so I can close this out. And so I have this one. So I want to rename this. I'll rename this to a new tenant here, and this is the demo. Let's just call it demo here. So we'll confirm that. So, and there is my journeys demo with my application one with these two apps in there. So application one with those two in there. So that's good. And so now I'm ready. I'm kind of happy with this. So what I did was I kind of imported these. These are two other tenants that I have, but I'm really happy with this one. So now I'm gonna go next, and at this point here, it's like, okay, I'm ready to deploy these tenants. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go and add, and so here is actually what I want to add. So let's go ahead and say next. So I've kind of done a little bit of massaging. It's got one app in there, so it's got one app that consists of those two virtual servers. So at this point here, now that I've actually used the tool, I can actually go ahead and start to deploy this. So it's going to have me put in some credentials. So I can actually put in some creds here. This is actually my big IP device that it's going to connect to. I'm putting, and then this would be the password for that device. let's go ahead and discover it. You can also make a backup if you want, or you can set up some other kind of destination. So I'm connecting. So now we're going to go ahead and deploy this. Yes, I want this operation to be deployed, and it's going to get a deployment screen here in a minute. And then what you'll be able to do is kind of watch this task. So it's initializing a log watcher, which is actually kind of really nice. It's kind of going through and making the changes for you. So as this tool gets more and more sophisticated, and really this is just a start. There's actually a lot going on in this tool. And so that's what's quite nice about using it, is that you can actually provide some feedback here. And so you can actually see now it's actually starting to deploy this declaration. So what does that mean? It means behind the scenes, it's crafting and building the application deployment using the common API. So we pulled in a UCS. We started to create a common API. It shouldn't actually take too long, because after 45 seconds, it will go to an asynchronous API. We can actually always go and look on BigIP to actually see there is our tenant. So as you can see, while that is actually being created, I'm actually in that tenant now, and go to the virtual server, and you can actually see these virtual servers are actually created. So these are the two virtual servers that I created in that journeys tenant. So journeys tenant 1, app 1, and let's go look at this kind of one that we actually pushed. So here is the pass through. It's in the following path, and you can kind of see now this is actually on BigIP itself, and so we were actually able to migrate this from a UCS file over with making some changes. Now here's what's really powerful. So Journeys is going to go through and run diagnostics on that entire thing. But what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to do a GET request. So I'm actually going to connect to this device, so you can actually see what's going on here on the API. It's just connecting, so it's connecting right here. It hasn't done anything yet, but actually watch this. This is the version that's running. So what I'm going to do now is I actually want to refresh this AS3. So I'm actually going to get the API, and there's a task for that. And so it actually came back, but watch the actual tenant that was created. See that? That tenant was actually created right there. And let me close out this. So this is actually what Journeys actually created. So now you're getting you're actually seeing a bit of both. So now you've got it right there. So 80 lines. So we went from a blank BigIP using Journeys to open up the UCS file, push the configuration. And so at this point, it's AS3 based API, right? So your choice is, okay, what now is your source of truth? Is it the BigIP itself, right? The UI? Not really, because your source of truth is really your declarative model. So you're using declarative API. So at this point, so here you can actually see that now I can actually interact with the system. So there, for example, is the application 1, and right there is a different app right there. So there's actually multiple apps in there. So yeah, application 1 is kind of like the overall name, and within this application I have this pass through. This is the pool member is actually outside of this, and so there is one application, and there is the second application. What's actually really kind of cool here is that we're actually using the pools. So for example, you can see here pool HTTP, and that's where that pool HTTP is. So think of it as this is your virtual virtual configuration, right? There's your virtual address right here, and here are our pools, right? The pools. So there's the pool for pool 80, right? These are the pools here, and then there's another one up the top here, which is pools HTTPS. So this is kind of how it was interacted. You can see right there, right here is the virtual configuration, and it put the pool member at the top. I can easily edit this. I can pull this pool member underneath if I wanted to. This pool member can actually go in here, so you can play with this. You can play with this configuration as you like. Watch this. I can cut this out, and I can go up one level. Oh, you'll know that this is really cool. It's got schema validation, so you can kind of specify, I want to put my pools down here, or if you want, you can put all your pools. You can kind of put all your pools together because they're really outside of that. So you can kind of put. So I want to define my virtuals up here, and I want to define my two pool members down here. So what I can do is do a Control A right here, and format that. So I just formatted the stock. And so you could also schema validate this. So you can see there's no schema validation here, but you can always put schema validation in. That's really, really, really easy to do. Just put the schema in here. Now, that right there is my configuration. But what happens now that I just kind of did a little bit of cleaning up here, just kind of like makes it a little bit easier between the two, between that. This is just really a description, by the way. And then here's your first app, your second app. Here I'm referring to one pool, second pool. So what I can do here is I can actually select all and actually post it back. Right, so this is kind of interesting. So now I'm actually posting. Now I'm posting outside of journeys. Now, why would you want to do that? Because this is your pipeline. Your pipeline is just using a REST client. So as you build, I can commit this now into Bitbucket or GitHub or whatever. That becomes my source of truth. So as I manipulate this file, as I use a tool to actually manage and work on this, now this is now my my daily active updates to the system. So Journeys was instrumental in making the migration, and then what I did was I used VS Code to actually pull the configuration and make some manipulation or check this into my Bitbucket GitHub, for example. And as you can see, quite nicely, look at that. It came back with a 200 OK, and because I actually didn't make any code changes, it says no change because there's a diff and there's no change right there. But you can see there's the tenant, and so you can see right there how nice it looks. Pools at the bottom, look how cool that is, right? So it just really did a nice, kind of clean, kind of a bit of a cleanup here, based on the configuration. So that's actually really, really, really nice. Super clean, super easy on how to use this tool and how to do that migration. So let's kind of do a little bit of a recap. And as you can see, this process is actually fully completed. So as it completed, everything is pretty much happy. It's gone through all its stages. There's some user evaluation that you can take a look at if you wanted to. So you can kind of look at the logs here a little bit if you want to as well. So I'm gonna exit out of here. Are you sure I want to finish? Yep. And so if you ever want to manipulate this again, and remember, it's just you're manipulating the source of truth, right? So you can continue with the migration, because here's the beautiful thing: you can create a new tenant. And so if you create a new tenant, you won't touch this tenant that we've used. So this tenant right here called Journeys Demo, everything will remain under here, but I can go and create another one called Journeys Demo 2. It's a completely new tenant, so I can now migrate some more apps. So when you migrate, kind of think about, I'm migrating a group of apps, or I'm migrating a project, and you could kind of put them under your own namespace project tenant, aka partition on Big AP, and then you could continue to migrate. So you might be migrating kind of like different pieces of the tool that you want. But I think this is a really good way of kind of getting started with the tools. So to recap, what we did was we installed Journeys, and to get to the Journeys tool, it's on F5 Dev Central. Just look up F5 Journeys. Go ahead and install it. You're welcome to update to reach out to the users. You can see there's some issues being filed here. For example, there was one filed yesterday. So you have any issues, you just file an issue, and then go back to the README, so you can see what I did is we went through the install process, and then once we got Journeys up and running installed, we connected to Journeys on port 8443 based on its IP address, and then we started the app migration. Once we started the app migration, we went into Big IP, we changed it to our tenant, and there are our two applications that were provisioned. So that is it for this demo. If you really like this content, please give it a huge thumbs up. If you're not subscribed, I am a few subscribers short from 500, so that would be great to get past that number. I really appreciate all the wonderful comments and feedback. If you have requests on videos, please let me know. If you need new features, if you need help on AS3 journeys, ACC, etc., just reach out to me. You can do that through GitHub or through YouTube or via my F5 email address. And hopefully you have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.